The maid Toddler gave a dying millionaire her last CPR to save her life, and did the unthinkable. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what happened on a quiet Tuesday morning in a big house in Connecticut, a house so large that even the echo of footsteps sounded expensive. This is a true story about a woman named Rosa Delgado, her 4-year-old daughter Lily, and a dying millionaire named Eleanor Whitfield. Stay with me until the end, because what this little girl did that morning, nobody, not one soul in that house, ever saw coming. Rosa had worked as a housemaid for the Whitfield family for almost 3 years. She cleaned floors that cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. She dusted paintings worth more than her entire life savings. And every single day, she smiled, said good morning, and did her job with quiet dignity. But dignity doesn't always get respect back. Mrs. Whitfield's daughter-in-law, a sharp-tongued woman named Candace, never missed a chance to remind Rosa where she stood. "Rosa, dear, could you make sure the help enters through the back? We have guests today." She said the help the way some people say a dirty word. Candace didn't like that Rosa sometimes brought her little daughter Lily to work when daycare fell through. She didn't like Rosa's accent. She didn't like the color of her skin. She never said it directly. People like Candace rarely do. But everyone in that house felt it, thick in the air, every single day. Old Eleanor Whitfield, though, was different. Eleanor was 78 years old, a widow, and the true owner of the family fortune. She'd built half of it herself back when women weren't supposed to sit in boardrooms. She was sharp, stubborn, and lonelier than anyone in that mansion realized. Her husband was gone. Her son barely visited. Her daughter-in-law only came around when money was involved, the only person in that entire house who ever looked Eleanor in the eyes and asked, "How are you feeling today, ma'am?" "Really?" was Rosa. And the only person who ever made Eleanor laugh, a real laugh from the belly, was a tiny 4-year-old girl named Lily, who called her Miss Ellie and left crayon drawings on her nightstand. Now, before I go further into this story, I want to ask you something. If you believe that kindness should never depend on how much money someone has, or what they look like, or where they come from, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is about to show you exactly what real kindness costs and exactly what it can save. It was a Tuesday morning. Rosa was in the kitchen, and Lily sat at the small table in the corner, coloring quietly, the way her mother had taught her. Stay still, stay quiet, don't touch anything. Mrs. Whitfield came down for her tea, same as every morning. She sat at the long dining table alone because Candace had already left for her tennis lesson and Eleanor's son was traveling for business again. Eleanor sipped her tea. She looked at Lily and smiled. "Good morning, little one. Are you drawing me another masterpiece?" Lily held up her paper proudly. "A crooked yellow sun, a purple dog. For you, Miss Ellie." Eleanor's eyes softened in that particular way only lonely people's eyes soften. Like something inside them, something they'd locked away for years, cracked open just a little. And then, without warning, Eleanor Whitfield's teacup slipped from her hand. It shattered on the marble floor. Her body went stiff, and then it didn't. Her face went pale, then gray, then almost blue around the lips. She clutched at her chest, gasped once, twice, and slid sideways out of her chair, crashing to the cold floor with a sound that no person in that house will ever forget. Rosa, in the kitchen, heard the crash and came running, and what she saw stopped her heart in her own chest. Eleanor Whitfield, the richest woman she had ever known, the closest thing to family she had in that cold house, was lying on the floor, not breathing, her lips turning the color of a bruised plum, her eyes half open, staring at nothing. Rosa dropped to her knees, screaming for help, but the house was empty. No butler, no nurse, no family. Just a maid, a dying woman, and a 4-year-old girl standing frozen by the table, crayon still in her small hand. Here's something you need to understand about Rosa. Back in her home country, before she ever set foot in America, she had been a nursing student. She never finished her degree. Life had other plans, but she remembered enough. She remembered CPR, and in that terrifying moment, her training took over. She tilted Eleanor's head back. She checked for breath. Nothing. She began chest compressions, counting under her breath, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face, screaming at the same time for anyone, to call 911. But here's the part of this story that will stay with you long after this video ends. Rosa's arms gave out. She had been compressing for almost 4 minutes straight, and panic and exhaustion hit her all at once. Her arms trembled violently. Her vision blurred with tears. She felt herself slipping, felt her strength draining, felt the horrifying weight of knowing that if she stopped, even for 10 seconds, Eleanor Whitfield might never open her eyes again. And that's when little Lily did the unthinkable. This 4-year-old girl, barely tall enough to see over the dining table, had spent countless afternoons at daycare watching a children's safety cartoon about helping a friend's heart. She had watched it maybe 20 times, giggling along with the cartoon puppy who taught kids to push, push, push to the beat. Nobody thought a 4-year-old could actually remember something like that. Nobody thought it mattered. But Lily remembered. She dropped her crayon. She ran to her mother's side. And in a small, trembling but strangely steady voice, she said, "Mommy, let me help," like the puppy's song. Rosa, half out of her mind with fear, tried to push her daughter back. "No, baby, no, stay away." But Lily placed her tiny hands right where her mother's had been, and she pushed. Small, quick pushes, humming the cartoon's rhythm under her breath, tears running down her own little cheeks because she could see her mother was scared and that scared her too. But she didn't stop. She kept pushing to that same silly beat from the cartoon, over and over, giving Rosa just enough seconds to catch her breath, wipe her eyes, and step back in. Together, a mother and her 4-year-old daughter, they kept Eleanor Whitfield's heart beating until the paramedics burst through those enormous front doors 7 minutes later. 7 minutes. Doctors would later say that without those compressions, without a single one of them, Eleanor's brain would have been starved of oxygen long before help arrived. She would have died right there on her own marble floor, alone except for a maid and a toddler nobody in that family ever truly valued. If this story is already making your chest tight, if you're already feeling that lump in your throat, do me one favor before we continue. Tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what happens next in this story, what the Whitfield family discovers about who Lily truly is, will change how you see this entire story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Eleanor Whitfield survived. Barely. She spent 9 days in the hospital, hooked to machines, fighting her way back from a heart attack that should have killed her. And when she finally opened her eyes on the 3rd day, foggy and confused, the first face she asked for wasn't her son's. It wasn't Candace's. "Where's Rosa?" she whispered. "Where's my little Lily?" When the family arrived at the hospital, expecting gratitude, expecting to play the role of the concerned relatives, Eleanor did something that shocked every single one of them. She refused to see her son first. She refused to see Candace at all. She asked the nurse to bring in the maid and her daughter. And when Rosa nervously stepped into that hospital room, holding little Lily's hand, Eleanor began to cry. "You saved my life," Eleanor said, her voice cracked and weak. "Both of you. A woman the world barely sees and a child the world doesn't take seriously. You saved me when my own family wasn't even in the house." Candace, standing in the doorway, folded her arms and rolled her eyes. "Well, it's not like they did anything special. Rosa just did what any employee should do in an emergency." Eleanor's eyes turned sharp, the same sharpness that had built a business empire from nothing decades before. "Employee?" she said. "Candace, that woman gave 4 minutes of her life trying to keep my heart beating with her bare hands, and when her arms gave out, her 4-year-old daughter stepped in and finished the job. You call that an employee doing her duty? I call it the only real family I had in that house that morning." The room went silent. For years, Candace had made comments, small ones, the kind people say and then pretend they didn't mean anything by it. Comments about people like Rosa. Comments about how those families always seem to have more children than they can afford. Comments dressed up as jokes at dinner parties, the kind of racism that hides behind a smile and a raised eyebrow, the kind that never says the ugly word out loud but makes sure everyone in the room understands exactly what's meant. Eleanor had heard all of it. For years, she'd stayed quiet, the way older generations sometimes do, not wanting to make a scene at her own family table. But lying in that hospital bed, staring at the woman and the child who had just given her a second chance at life, something in Eleanor broke loose. Something that had been sealed shut for far too long. "I've stayed silent too long in my own house," Eleanor said, looking directly at her daughter-in-law. "I let you speak about Rosa like she was less than us, like her daughter didn't matter, and I am ashamed of myself for it. That ends today." If you've ever had a moment in your own life where you finally spoke up after staying silent for years, I want you to think about that moment right now while you keep watching. Because Eleanor Whitfield's story was about to get even more complicated. And if you want to see exactly how, make sure you're subscribed, because this next part is the twist nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Here's where the story takes a turn that even Eleanor herself didn't expect. While Eleanor was recovering, doctors ran a full battery of tests, standard procedure after a major cardiac event for a woman her age. Blood work. Genetic screening tied to a hereditary heart condition that ran in the Whitfield bloodline, something Eleanor's own father had died from decades earlier. As part of the process, because Lily had spent so much time in close contact with Eleanor, and because Rosa mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Lily's father had walked out before she was even born and that she genuinely didn't know much about his family history, a kind young doctor suggested running a simple comparative screening. Just to be thorough. Just to rule things out. Nobody expected what came back. The genetic markers didn't just rule things out. They pointed to something impossible. Something that sent the head cardiologist back to double-check the lab results not once but 3 times. Lily was related to Eleanor Whitfield, by blood. It turned out that Eleanor's own son, David, the very man who barely visited his dying mother, had a secret from over 5 years earlier. A brief relationship during a difficult time in his marriage to Candace. A relationship he ended quickly and buried completely, never telling a soul, not even when the woman he'd been involved with became pregnant and later left the state, struggling alone, eventually settling into life as a single mother working cleaning jobs to survive. That woman was Rosa's cousin, and when tragedy struck, a car accident that took that young mother's life just 2 years later, it was Rosa, family by blood on her cousin's side, who took in the toddler without a second thought and raised her as her own daughter, never once telling Lily the full truth because there simply wasn't one to tell. Rosa herself hadn't known who Lily's biological father truly was, just a name. A name that, until that hospital test came back, meant absolutely nothing to her. Lily wasn't just the maid's daughter. She was David Whitfield's biological daughter, Eleanor's real granddaughter, blood of her blood, all along, quietly cleaning floors and coloring crayon suns in the corner of a kitchen while the family upstairs looked right past her. Can you imagine sitting in that hospital room and learning that the tiny girl who just helped save your life, the girl your own daughter-in-law dismissed as the help's kid, was your actual grandchild the entire time? I need you to imagine that feeling for a second, because that's exactly the gut punch this family felt in that sterile hospital room. And if a story like this is the kind that keeps you up at night thinking about it, that's exactly the kind of story this channel exists to tell you. So go ahead, hit subscribe, because we are far from finished. David Whitfield, when confronted, didn't deny it. He couldn't. He sat in a hospital hallway chair with his head in his hands and admitted everything to his mother, his voice shaking with a shame he'd carried alone for 5 long years. He admitted he'd known, somewhere deep down, the moment he first laid eyes on old photographs Rosa had shown around the house of the little girl. He admitted he'd been a coward. He admitted he was terrified of what Candace would do, terrified of losing the comfortable life he'd built, terrified enough that he let his own daughter grow up 2 floors below him in the very same house, being treated as beneath his family, while he said absolutely nothing. Candace's reaction was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who had spent years looking down on the very child who turned out to be her husband's daughter. She screamed. She threatened divorce. She called Rosa terrible things in front of hospital staff, things I won't repeat here, things rooted in the same ugly prejudice she'd always carried just beneath the surface, except now it had nowhere left to hide. But Eleanor Whitfield, 78 years old, fresh off a near-fatal heart attack, sat up in that hospital bed, and in a voice that silenced the entire room, said the words that would change everything. "I have been surrounded by people who share my blood but never once showed me real love," Eleanor said. "And I was saved by a woman who shares none of my blood but showed me more compassion in 3 years than my own family showed me in decades. And it turns out all along, the little girl with the purple crayon dog was my own grandchild. God has a strange sense of humor and an even stranger sense of justice." What happened over the following months would change the entire Whitfield family forever. Eleanor didn't just welcome Lily into the family with warm words. She acted. She legally recognized Lily as her granddaughter, working with lawyers to ensure that no matter what happened with David and Candace's crumbling marriage, Lily's place in the family and her future was permanently secured. She didn't do it to buy affection. She did it because, for the first time in years, she had a reason to believe in family again, and she wasn't going to let that reason slip away a second time. And Rosa, who had spent 3 years being treated as invisible in that enormous house, who had given 4 minutes of pure exhausted effort trying to save a dying woman's life with her bare hands. Eleanor insisted Rosa move into the guest wing of the estate, not as a maid anymore, but as Lily's guardian and, in Eleanor's own words, the closest thing to a daughter I have left who actually calls me and means it. Eleanor paid for Rosa to finally finish her nursing degree, the one she'd abandoned decades earlier when life demanded she survive instead of dream. Rosa graduated 18 months later, and she now works as a registered nurse in the same hospital where she and her daughter once fought so hard to keep a stranger's heart beating. Candace, unable to stomach the humiliation and unwilling to change the way she saw the world, eventually left. David, humbled and forced finally to grow up, spent years slowly rebuilding a relationship with the daughter he'd been too afraid to claim, and with the mother he'd nearly lost. And little Lily, now a bit older, still keeps a photograph on her nightstand. Not of the mansion, not of any fancy vacation the family later took her on. Just a simple photograph of her and Miss Ellie, taken the day Eleanor was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, both of them smiling, Eleanor's frail hand resting gently on top of Lily's small one. Eleanor Whitfield lived another 6 good years after that heart attack. 6 years, she says, without hesitation, she never would have had if a maid and her 4-year-old daughter hadn't refused to give up on her when the rest of her family wasn't even in the room. 6 years she spent making sure everyone around her understood that real family isn't about blood, and it isn't about money, and it certainly isn't about the color of someone's skin or how much their labor is worth on paper. Real family is about who shows up when your heart literally stops beating on a cold kitchen floor. Before we close this story out, I want to ask you something honestly. How many people in your own life have shown up for you in ways nobody else even noticed? How many quiet acts of love from people the world overlooks have actually kept you going through your hardest moments? If a story like this touched something in you, if it reminded you that kindness, real kindness, always finds a way to matter, I want you to do 2 things for me. First, tell me in the comments below where you're watching from today, and tell me who in your life has been your own quiet hero, the one nobody else gave enough credit to. And second, if this channel and these stories mean something to you, please subscribe right now and share this video with someone you love. These stories only keep reaching people like you, people who still believe kindness matters because you take a moment to pass them on. Rosa never asked for anything that day. She wasn't thinking about money or gratitude or a future she couldn't have imagined. She was thinking about a woman's life and about doing what was right, even when her own arms were shaking and giving out beneath her. And her daughter, a 4-year-old girl who should have been too small and too scared to understand what was happening, remembered a silly cartoon song about pushing to the beat and used it to help save a life. Sometimes the people the world overlooks are exactly the ones who end up saving it. And sometimes the family we're truly born into isn't discovered through blood tests or legal documents. It's discovered in the 4 most terrifying, most exhausting, most heroic minutes of a person's life, when everything else falls away, and all that's left is one human being refusing to let another one go. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If it moved you even half as much as it moved me while telling it, don't scroll away just yet. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell so you never miss the next story, and I'll see you very soon with another true story about the kind of quiet, everyday heroes this world doesn't talk about nearly enough.